Steven Pinker once fantasized about going back in time and calling Nietzsche short and then raping his sister. What a tough guy, what a manly man. Let's read this quote together. If I could go back in time, I might confront Nietzsche as follows. I would say to him, I am Superman, hard, cold, terrible, without feelings and without conscience. As you recommend, Nietzsche, I will achieve heroic glory by exterminating some chattering dwarves, starting with you, shorty. And I might do a few things to that Nazi sister of yours too, unless that is, you can think of a reason why I should not. Steven Pinker is what we call a midwit. He is smart, but he's not that smart. And we could forgive someone for being not that smart, for being 115 IQ and thinking maybe they know more than they know. But his big problem is that he's not brave, that he's also arrogant in the fact that he's a coward, because he's not able to challenge big ideas. He is the type of person who enjoys presenting himself with this self-image of being a sophisticated public intellectual, a big brain, a man who reads many books, a man of knowledge, a sophisticated big brain man of knowledge. And of course, with all this knowledge he's gathered, for some reason he's decided to arrive to this position where he's decided that all the values that we currently hold in the public consciousness in the West right now are just correct. We got them all right. And that's good. And we should stand on those values. And we should reinforce those values. So we don't have to do any thinking. We don't have to try to figure out if there's anything wrong, because we actually got it all right. We're geniuses, aren't we? And so what he can do is he can become a mouthpiece for these values. And he can go out and he can talk about these values. You know the reason why these values are good and the way we see the world in the West is good? Do you know the reason why it is? It's because it's the moral way of seeing it. Because we believe in things like well-being. We believe in things like utilitarianism. We believe in the things like sharing things with everybody, all this type of stuff. And there's no critique, there's no self-reflection, none of this stuff. And when you come across someone like Nietzsche, who is a genius, a piece of dynamite that destroys the paradigm we're currently in, he is evil, he is a demon, and we castigate him. Do you know what we castigate him like? We castigate him like an old Christian priest. 500 years ago, a Christian priest pointing at that person outside the norm, talking about this new thing called science, and we point at him and be like, he's the immoral bad guy. That 115 IQ midwit Christian priest who was operating as that person who held the community together, who kept the community together and had to push out the weirdos and the outsiders and the people who were doing the new thinking, people who were chipping away at the worldview model by Christian society in order to blast ourselves forward into the future. And so what we have in Steven Pinker is exactly this. And of course, he sells himself as someone who stands for the values of the West, stands for pretty beautiful ideas like well-being. Oh, we believe in this well-being, we believe in enlightenment. Oh, he stands for the enlightenment, does he? Oh, brilliant. The blistering energy of the progressive, the revolutionary, the rebellious attitude of the enlightenment. He's owning on the Christians, I'd say. I say he loves that. I say he loves him and Sam Harris probably chill out the whole time and be like, I love dunking on those backwards, ignorant people, those rednecks, those Christians. And he's the one blasting forward with the new moral way of seeing the world. Oh, that's so excellent. But you know what? He's not even that moral, because you can find a picture of him on the internet of having dinner with Jeffrey Epstein. Well, that's very interesting. This opens up our eyes an awful lot, because he's a high priest of this modern, new atheist, well-being, shallow, liberal worldview, this sterile, soulless way of looking at the world that promotes all these religious values of our age, such as well-being and all this type of stuff. And of course, he's fraternizing, he's fraternizing with these demonic people, these highly immoral people, these horrific people who are doing terrible things in the name of science and all his beautiful worldviews. But of course, he doesn't take any extreme moral stance against him. He doesn't write in his pretty little books that he's going to go after Jeffrey Epstein and threaten to rape his sister, although I don't know what that would really make a difference in anyway. But he doesn't call Jeffrey Epstein short. He doesn't go bully Jeffrey Epstein for, doing things that are crooked. Instead, he attacks a German incel who lived on a mountain. The German incel who writes books that makes everybody mad, writes books that hurts people's feelings. And he does this because he is a coward, because he wants to fit in. He's like that dude who was bullied in high school, and he grew up and he found solace in books. He found an identity in being a book coper and building a big library of mediocre 115 IQ midwit intellectuals to share his thoughts. And he sat down and he said, that's who I'm going to be. I'm going to be this guy. And this makes me feel like I fit in somewhere. And then he starts to hang out with these people, and he meets this Epstein character, and it's all romantic. He's like, oh, we're so cool. We're like the new Enlightenment scientist, dunking on the world. We've defeated hated the past and all this type of stuff. Let's all hang out together. This is who we are. But he doesn't have the courage to stand for something. He doesn't have the courage to break with a paradigm. He doesn't have the courage to challenge these big, beautiful ideas like well-being, even though he's not moral. He likes to think he's moral because he says these beautiful ideas about well-being, but he's not moral in his actions. And that's always how you can tell. This is why Nietzsche is so nasty. This is why Nietzsche hurts your feelings, because he's pointing this out. Most morality is hypocrisy. Most people who talk about morality are articulating with their mouths things that they don't do with their hands, things that they don't do with their bodies. Action is an awful lot harder than speech. And so what you have with these characters is this belief, this way they present themselves that is so flattering to them. You know, these smart, high IQ, super intellectuals standing for the righteous values of our society, you know, but none of the actions that are needed to back this stuff up. And of course, the people who truly push society forward, the true enlightened thinkers, the people who progress society, you know, the thing that they did, was it 400 years ago, 300 years ago when the Enlightenment knocked around? That's, you know, when the real hard work was done. What were these people doing? Well, they were pushing things forward. They were being critical thinkers. They were challenging first principles that hold society all together. This is why Nietzsche is such a mind-bending read, such a mind-bending intellectual, such a brilliant man, because he was brave enough to say things that were heresy of his age, to challenge fundamental principles that were so deep, so dangerous, so scary, that they would blow our minds. This is why he's so intoxicating to read, because he's speaking the truth. That's what it comes down to. And you don't even need to be too smart to do this, you know? A lot of people might say something like, oh, I don't think Andrew Tate maybe is as smart as Nietzsche. Andrew Tate is certainly a smarter man than people give him credit for. But he speaks the truth. He tries his best to be brutally honest. And this is why he's so captivating to people, because he's able to show people truth in a very accessible and down-to-earth way. He's not pretentious. He's not going around and talking about morality, and that of course gets him in trouble. That's because everybody says, well, you're not moral, you're a bad person, you're hurting all these people. Yes, of course, this is true. This is true. He's not going around celebrating the beautiful ideas that we all like to bullshit ourselves with, that we all like to arrogantly chatter inside of our heads. But of course, that's because he's trying to tell the truth. He's trying to show us the shadow of the world, the things that we all know are real, but we ignore. This is a Jungian idea, you know. You pretend that those shadows aren't there, and they're not going to go away. Nature is not going to get rid of her dark side because you say beautiful things all the time. That's not going to happen. Instead, nature is just going to allow that shadow to show up in a way that you can't control. Instead, if you confront the shadow, you confront the dark side of human nature, the brutality within man, the savagery, the beast within us, the animal nature that we have, the brutal, cold, indifferent, harsh soul that we have inside of ourselves that does exist, that is definitely there. You confront that honestly, and you might be able to tame it and give it direction, give it purpose, perhaps even give it morality. But if you're someone like Pinkner, a dork new atheist, a nerd who's trying to fit in with all the cool people like me and Nietzsche and Tate, all the badasses who tell the truth, if you're just this little frigid nerd who never had a girlfriend when you were younger and decided that you're going to like talk about books in order to make up for that, if you're like that character, you're going to deny things like the shadow. Because if you start talking about the shadow, you start talking about the truth. You're going to scare these other midwits, the people who are going to read your books, the people who are going to give you status. You'll scare them off. Because you'll tell the truth to the neurotic society and they'll be like, oh, get rid of him. Oh, scary. Oh, something difficult, some challenge. Oh. And then what happens? Well, then you choose to lie. You choose to say the beautiful lies, the beautiful ideas, the things that everybody can digest, the things that are not true. You deny the shadow part of life, the harsh parts of life, the brutal parts of life. And then what happens? Well, you become friends with one of the most shadowy characters of all, Jeffrey fucking Epstein. How did that happen? Wow, how ironic. You denying the true dark side of life that Nietzsche is trying to tell you about in his books, so that you don't have to go find it out for yourself by getting raped or having someone in your family murdered. No, instead, you can actually come into contact with this and try to cathartically learn it through a naughty, nasty, screechy Nietzsche. But instead, you can't do that. And then, of all things, you end up being tethered to, linked, connected with one of the most shadowy, strangest, darkest phenomenons that we've seen in the last couple of decades. How does that stuff happen? It is very Jungian when you look at it. It's got a huge amount of poetic justice wrapped up in it. A great irony of fate that it works out this way, that these dorks get exposed for what they are. So what are these dorks even trying to do? Well, they romanticize the 17th century. They romanticize the 18th century. They romanticize the Enlightenment era. This is the original woke movement. This is the moment when all of this stuff was actually maybe a bit cool. Maybe a time you can give them a pass and say that was when it mattered, because they were living in a very Christian age. And the power structure was very heavily Christian. The church had an awful lot of power. The architecture and infrastructure of the church had an awful lot of control over the way that people thought. And it was very dangerous and edgy to come out and say something like, I'm an atheist, or I want to challenge the authority of the church. The likes of Voltaire and all this. These people, they were putting themselves out there. They were doing stuff. They were interesting people. Many of these inspired Nietzsche, these French philosophers and whatnot. But these dudes, these modern dudes, you're dorks. They're like guys who are getting into punk rock, showing up with a mohawk into the classroom to try act cool, to try fit in. They're showing up 40 years, 50 years too late. It's not cool when you're doing that. You're a bit behind the times, actually. And you're clearly just doing it now because it is safe. Because everybody else says it's okay to be punk rock and to be different and be weird. Now that everybody says that that's okay, that's what's going on in the modern world, you do it. Because you're a normie, you're a midwit, you're a dork who wants to fit in. You don't want to take risks. And this is the thing, those Enlightenment philosophers, they were taking risks. They were putting themselves out there. They were advancing progress and science because it was dangerous to do it then. And in the end, the man who's trying to tell you that all of this is out of date, that we have moved past this era of enlightenment and more interesting questions have shown up. The man who sat down and created a comprehensive critique of Enlightenment thought that set us up for the premises and the paradigm that led us into the 20th century and beyond was Friedrich Nietzsche, the man that you're being so mean to, the man that wrote books that hurt your feelings, is actually the guy that could help you out of this midwit rut that you found yourself in. Now, if you don't want to be like Steven Pinker, if you don't want to be seen like a dork, you must avoid at all costs developing a reputation for being seen as a dork. People will look at you and think to themselves, oh my God, there he is. The guy who's stuck in the 17th century, the guy who's stuck behind us all, the guy who's uncool, the loser who hasn't caught up with Nietzsche, the loser who's afraid of Nietzsche's nasty books, the loser who sits there and fantasizes about raping Nietzsche's sister, like what is going on, the loser who tries to be cool by hanging out with renowned weirdos, all this type of stuff. You've got to avoid this stuff. And in order for you to do that, you must take control of your own story. You must build your reputation from the ground up. You must learn how to project out an image. You must learn how to tell your story so that people see it properly. You must learn how to see your story properly. You must learn the skills that are necessary to tell your story. And this all comes down to storytelling, personal branding, speaking skills, communication skills, articulation skills, using the technology available to us to project an image out properly. You must learn how to do all these things so that you do not end up being known as the world-renowned dorks that all these new atheists are. And if you want to do that, I can train you, I can teach you, I can show you the light, I can show you the way. So if you're interested in this, I work with people on helping them build their personal brands, getting them to put themselves out there, using tools like the internet and their own story in order to bring more success into their lives. If you're interested in that, I have more free information on this down below. You can book a call and you can go and apply, and I'll send all this stuff to you via email and all that type of stuff. Thank you very much for watching. I will talk to you later. Stay juicy. Bye.